Hi, everybody. I'm David Knapp. I'd first like to introduce Erin and let her share a little bit about what she's doing here with us today from GumGum.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm not Phil. I am Erin McCallion. I'm the CMO of GumGum. Unfortunately, Phil had a death in the family, so I'm sitting in for him today. But GumGum is a contextual first advertising platform. We power online advertising without the use of personal data, and we've been doing that for just about 15 years now.
And okay. And my name is Douglas Cajas, and I am with the RTL Ad Alliance. We are the insights and media solutions arm of the RTL Group. The RTL Group is Europe's largest media owner, and we own the #1 or #2 TV group across 12 markets in the region. And here in the US, you're probably more familiar with us, where we own Fremantle, the production arm that makes popular shows like American Idol, X Factor, and Got Talent. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I got a chance to talk to you both a little bit earlier, and I am really fascinated. We have one media firm, one ad tech company, and I'd love to understand, how do you think about data and personalization, and how do you think about how that's going to be evolving over the next few years?
So I think from a CMO perspective, as you think about data and you think about going about it in these challenging times, you have to really first be very thoughtful, and think through the data that you want to collect. I think right now a lot of us are in planning seasons, and it's all about, who's your target customer and what does that data profile look like on that customer that will help you achieve your goals. I think secondly, you need to think about, is that data that you want to collect ethical, right? What are the ethics of your company? What do you stand for? Is it aligned with who you are and what you believe? And if you're not sure what the ethical data policies are at your company, you should have a conversation right now to find out. And then you have to also be realistic, because based on the data that you've been collecting or you need to collect to meet your 23 goals, is that possible? The consumers are more in control of their data than ever before. I think Google just announced today an ad center, or this week, where now you can turn on and off your what you're sharing. The control is back in the hands of the consumer, and so if you can't meet the needs of what your data profile is, how are you going to start to work with other partners, like contextual partners, like your media partners, to still get the same results, but maybe without the data that you're used to collecting?
Yeah, so for us, data is also quite an important element. We have for quite some time, with GDPR in Europe, we saw that actually coming on the horizon and prepared for it by beginning to build our DMP with login data. And that was important for us, one, because privacy and consent really should be first and foremost. Secondly, though, of course, we need to make sure that we are using data intelligently and to help marketers achieve their goals. That means for us being able to actually have richer profiles of our customers, so that we can help them really achieve those marketing objectives, whether those find themselves really at the top of the funnel or toward the bottom of that funnel. So some of the things that we are doing actually is at a parent company level. Our parent company is Bertelsmann. Bertelsmann is not only the owner of the RTL Group, but also of BMG, and also Arvato and Penguin Random House. So we want to really, we believe that one of the ways to create a let's say, a competitive ability to help marketers the way that search, Google does, or some of the other social players, is by being able to understand what consumers are doing really across all of our subsidiaries and across all media types. So yeah, this is one of the things that we are doing.
It's interesting because, Erin, you were talking about looking at your data operations and really thinking through, like, is it realistic? And then you're saying, I have a ton of data, even though you're operating within Europe with all of the heavy regulation there around what you can do. I'm very curious about like, what is your advice to CMOs when they're thinking about future-proofing their campaigns, and also thinking about when to, we were talking a little bit about when to draw the line between you have a major national or global brand that can afford to buy broad-scale advertising, and when to think about harnessing that power of the data to personalize the segments and go from there.
Please.
I was just going to say, I think in the remit of the CMO, there's quite a bit that is under our remit and our profile. And I think first things first is that my best advice would be, if you're not friends with your general counsel, make friends right away and get on the same page on how you're understanding the regulation. It's very complex. I can't get up here and proliferate around all of the regulation that's going on and all that will be coming. I have to have a very strong relationship with the general counsel. We have to be on the same page of, how we interpret it, and then we have to go and have those conversations with our partners to make sure that they're in line with what our ethics and beliefs are. So, for sure, I would say that's the number one thing I think CMOs should be doing right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think first and foremost, again, I believe is really making sure that you are getting people's permissions. I think we will come back to that time and again. I think this is really, really important. I think that if people know and you're transparent about this, your consumers will respect you and they will give you data because they will get things in return. So obviously for us, they're not just giving us, their data and their, consumption habits just so that we can, create a DMP. But for them, one of the greatest value is being able to provide them with incredible content and exactly the kind of content that they want to see. And so this is how one of the ways that we use data to, making sure that it's serving both our viewers, our consumers, and of course also our marketers.
And I would only add is that, I know you work at Amex. I've been an Amex customer for over 20 years. I think you all do a great job with the data. I feel like it's very trusted. You use it, to help provide better customer service, better solutions and offerings. And more brands should aspire to do what you do with it. I think you take it, you put the customer first at the center of everything, and that's very, that's very important. It's why I've been a valued customer for over 20 years, and I think there's many Amex holders around the world that would agree.
Thank you. We definitely take it very seriously and have quite a lot of training on it. Obviously some firms have more data than others. So how do you think about, as you were mentioning, Aaron, the changing regulatory environment, if in 2 years companies are unable to just buy lists and use that data and customers have refused, how do you think about adapting to that new reality, and not, if you're a company that perhaps doesn't have the first party data to use instead?
Yeah, it's a bit of a scary time, isn't it? But I think that, there's a shift happening in advertising and the way marketers need to think about that advertising. And it's more about, all of consumption, almost all of consumption is, or at least in my world, is happening online now. I'm a mom. I have 2 young children. I'm on my mobile phone. I'm making split decisions on buying things, groceries, clothes, whatever they need for school, and I'm moving on to the next thing. And I think that advertising has to flow along with consumers like me. And a lot of the data that we've been collecting over the years, I would say, kind of hinders that ability, because you're looking at past experiences to kind of meet me now, and it's not meeting me now. I'm making the decision, I'm moving on. So at GumGum, we call it the mindset matrix, but we're building solutions that are going to allow advertisers to meet them in the moment that they're actually in. And that's not just contextual relevance, it's contextual relevance. It's coupled with, beautiful creative ad formats that are relevant to the environment and to the consumer, and then being able to measure that with attention is going to be what we think the future is. And you can do all of that really today with GumGum without the use of personal data, but that's what we see the future going to, is like meeting folks in the moment, in the digital environment, and that they are in. And it's a big shift from a way I think a lot of marketers and advertisers have worked historically.
Yeah, and you said a few things there that really resonated with me. One is, clicking on something one time is not a definitive statement of my needs for the rest of eternity.
Exactly.
So we have to be able to analyze the data quickly enough and then be able to action it as well, to move as quickly as the customer is, because you have that decision journey that is nonlinear and a lot faster than a typical campaign lead cycle. And you also talked about the importance of having that, like some stopping creative to make sure as we're scrolling on our phones, and I'm not listening to my panelists, I have my questions on here, to make sure we get that attention. And, you know, and again, you also mentioned the mindsets, like we have that decision journey of like awareness, consideration, and purchase, and a lot of marketing, because of I think the complexity of how it is to set up, is really just like, let me get the convert, let me get the buy, and not really set up for that full journey, especially if you're looking cross devices, cross platforms. Like, how are we really following you on that path? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So, we have heard, I think, for the last few years that the importance of the rise of the connected television or smart TVs, and God knows they've been an incredible blessing to our living room. And so we really think about how is it that we can help ultimately brand marketers communicate and connect with viewers really all along that journey, as you described. So one of the ways that we do that is, of course, through advanced television. So we are, we want to, the fact is that while we have connected televisions, the fact is in Europe, approximately 3/4 of viewers are still using it to watch live TV. So it's still, we're a little bit slower in terms of the adoption, even though, of course, the secular trend is there and we're capturing it, via our, catch-up platforms, as is happening here in the U.S. But the fact is that we need to begin there, right? So how do we go from helping you create awareness, and how can we get that communication? The fact is, one of the challenges that we have with CTV is, as you mentioned, the fact is you have multiple screens. Right? So as a matter of fact, you have other screens competing with you. You have, your mobile phone, your tablet, or your laptop. We're multitasking all of the time. So the question is, how can we then continue that conversation? And we now have, thanks to the operating system, of the television sets throughout most of Europe, HBB TV, we can actually take that conversation from, if I showed you an ad, let's say about Etsy, just in general about everything that you can get, unique gifts. The question is, okay, well, let me show you though exactly what I mean by unique gifts. Let me show you the kind of gifts that you can get. So having that conversation, then I can move that from there, and by creating a household ID, then we can connect with you over the other screens, whether that's on the laptop or also on digital, and bring you really a little bit further along. So have a conversation with you or two to be able to actually target you if you haven't watched, the ad on the linear campaign, as you said, the large campaign. So, for us, ATV is a way of helping, really continue that conversation from brand and all the way, hopefully, to the purchase. So we have, for example, certain agreements with, in France, for example, we're partnering with Carrefour, one of the major supermarket chains. So the idea is we want to, of course, understand also consideration, right, and intent. So that, as you said, it's really, really important that you capture people at the right time, right? If you've already bought it, then, it's gone, right? Our job is to try to understand, when is it now that you want to actually get people, as they're thinking about buying it, when are they thinking about that? So partnerships like that with retailers are helping us. But of course, because we're blessed that we have, a lot of other media, we also know, for example, if you're reading in a magazine about maybe shoes, okay, so then I know if you continue to read more and more about shoes, then I understand you may be actually interested in maybe shopping for shoes. So all of this, bringing all of this together to help, really provide the full loop.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to that before I go to my next one?
No.
Okay. So We're talking about incredibly sophisticated strategies for personalization and for contextual relevance. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to say about your last comment. And when you think about contextual relevance, I think a lot of people think, here is the website, here is the banner tile, like I want to be contextual to that. But that's really just us talking to ourselves about like the media that they're looking at. Contextual relevance for me means what's on the mind of the customer in that moment. And so there's two kinds of context, like visually context of what is around if they're looking at your ad, but then also the context of like what's going on in their day. Like I sell small business credit cards, so small business owners don't wake up thinking like, I can't wait to see David's ad when I log into the site. Like, I wish that they did. I mean, they certainly are clicking on it, but that they're probably worried about hiring, getting customers, growing revenue, all of these other things, and we're like 100th on the list. So that's kind of the context that I think through of how am I delivering that value to the customer in that moment versus like, it's sitting adjacent to your statement versus your transaction versus whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's exactly how the contextual insights can help you, right? And none of that you're talking about personal data at all. And so I think that's the value that contextual vendors bring. And I think if brands or agencies are not dabbling it, they need to be for 23, right? Where the testing period of figuring out what works is coming to a close here. I know Google keeps delaying it, but the fact of the matter is that you do need to start to understand how to make sense of that data and leverage it. So it's a great point.
So as we think about the evolving future, you mentioned your speed dial has GCO on it. Or your general counsel's office, who else is on that speed dial that you need in the room to be able to move with alacrity?
That's a great question. I think you have to understand you have to have a good understanding of the technology. And I think there was an earlier panel here, which I liked, where you can't be afraid as a CMO to say, I don't understand. And you have to explain this to me like 101, right? Because again, the remit of a CMO is very broad and complex, and I don't understand everything. And so I'm looking for my vendors, I'm a vendor, but to my vendors to help me, my heads of product to help me understand how it all works, so that we can make the best decisions. So I think, being really honest and humble with yourself, I think what one of the last speakers has said is spot on. You've got to be aware of what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know, you got to fill the room so you understand and can make better decisions moving forward.
And at your clients, like which are the most sophisticated teams, like in terms of cross-functional partnership? Who are the key voices represented?
Well, we usually have the head of growth, for example, might be there. So they're quite, sophisticated in terms of performance marketing. So, but of course, it's interesting. We have obviously like a swath of clients from small up and coming D2C brands to more established brands, and D2C brands have really mastered performance marketing. And of course, now they also find the need to be able to work on the sort of upper funnel of that. Of that equation. So I think sometimes we find ourselves either with the folks who are leading the growth, but also increasingly also just the brand development.
Right. So it's starting from, one of the things I find so fascinating is there's a lot of conferences that are always talking about like, is it art or science? Is it branding? Is it performance marketing? All of these things. And I'm like, in my head, it should be a continuous conversation of we start with the customer insight and the research qualitatively. We can test it at scale to validate, but you develop the product, and then you shouldn't be then, like I think what often can happen is you create a persona, develop the product, and then you like put the advertising in the world and then give a completely different team the task of like isolating who is responding. Yeah. But really you should be thinking about like, did the persona that we created this for, are they seeing the ads? And then are they converting? And so it should be that, I think, holistic cross-functional conversation. And I loved what you said about just filling in the gaps in your knowledge, because to your point, like you have to understand the product development and the data analytics and the technology and the legal environment and all of these other things, which is a lot of content to learn, and then the fact that it's adapting. Like we were talking earlier about how anyone that says they're an expert in social media buying is like a total liar because it changes all the time. Like how could you be an expert in TikTok when it's brand new, right? And they don't even have, well, I won't go on about that, but so you can't be an expert in something that doesn't have a playbook that's like been tested and validated. So what other challenges do you see besides the need to bring in diverse perspectives?
I mean, I think just the environment that we're in right now, and the economy, it's something that it's going to be top of mind for all of us headed into 23, and hope only 23, but we don't know. And it'll be interesting to see how advertising adjusts, and especially I'm mindful of diversity in advertising. It's been a hot topic, right? We're going into a period where if you look at the last Great Recession, Hispanic and Black households lost 50%, more than 50% of their net worth. It'll be interesting to see how advertisers already challenged with data, already challenged with regulation, are thinking about, how to communicate to those diverse audiences, stay top of mind, win business, whatnot. It's just another complexity to already, complex time. Also, I think, advertisers are going to be, and I expect that brands talking to their agencies are going to be looking for partners that are trusted and true. I think when you're in an economic downturn, sometimes it can be hard to take risks. You might want to, but you also have a client that is watching every penny and being very mindful of the spend, and probably threatening to take back spend left and right. So you have to look at, as you think about your cookieless future and how you're targeting, you have to work with vendors and partners that have been in the business for a while, right? Like that just aren't coming out with the newest and hottest alternatives, but that have been doing this for a while, that you can trust to deliver, because it's going to be a challenging time in at least the next, hopefully only next, but year ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think the question is, are you looking to satisfy Wall Street, or are you really looking to build a long-term business? And if that's the case, I would say that recessions really offer the best opportunity for growth, for gaining new customers and winning market share, because this is exactly when most brands say, we're going to need you to do more with less. And you can do that. You can optimize what you have. But I think this is also the best opportunity. I think, I think it's really important to make sure that you are retaining clients, depending, of course, the category that you're in, but you don't want any, people to think of switching. You want to make sure that people completely understand, what your value proposition is. This is absolutely key. And again, secondly, when folks are deciding to, retract or do less, well, that's just an opportunity. And again, you have to just look at it.
It makes the media buy a little cheaper.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. That's exactly right. So we don't want that, to happen, because they could, it's interesting, right? We heard how some of the private label brands actually obviously thrive during this time, and I think it's a wonderful thing. That category is a wonderful thing, but we want to make sure, of course, that particularly some of the non-private brands, lose permanently part of that share, right? Some of those folks who decide to trade during the tough moments.
Well, and we know with every downturn there's a recovery, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you most excited about over the next few years?
I'm excited about, I think, what's next in this post kind of personal data world, because it's going to be a fascinating time. I mean, when I started in marketing, online was very new, so I've followed this trend from not really having a lot of insights on the customer, having more than I can handle, and now kind of a little bit going back to the drawing board and figuring out how to do it next. I think in 23 and 24, you're going to hear a lot, if you haven't already, around attention, and I think that's where context. It's been around. It's great. There's companies that are doing it very well today, but I think it's marrying context with attention is going to be that next stage. Because to your point, that measurement and understanding what's working, and how to drive, how to drive folks from the top of funnel down is going to be very important. That attention metric that everyone is talking about is going to be a component of that, because I think ultimately what we're getting to is going to be a place where you're going to be able to create dynamic advertising across all the digital platforms, right? And so it's not just going to be taking one set of creative and, throwing it up on all the digital platforms that exist, because you're, again, going back to that consumer, you have to meet them in the moment. And so your advertising is going to have to be as nimble as your customer is. And so that's where I think we're moving to. And the next stage of that is marrying more data and insights. And I think attention is that next piece. So I expect that to be a big buzzword. I know it's already in Europe quite, maybe more even talked about than the US, but I think there'll be more to come in the years ahead.
Yeah, just to build on the attention piece, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think we're going to, in the end, we have a number of challenges, that have arisen really in the new living room. One of those challenges happens to be attention, right? It doesn't matter if I've created this ad, if nobody's watching it, then, or engaging with it in any way, then, then it's, then it was for nothing, right? So being able to. This is, one of the things that we need to do, of course, in order to create ads that, garner, tremendous attention is it has to start with great insight, great creative. If you do not have this, then, it will not work. But secondly, we need to be able to obviously deliver that really to the right customer and at the right time. Right? I mean, as context is important. Frame of mind, as you mentioned, is important. What am I thinking about at the moment? And what I'm personally excited about is developments that we are seeing in our space, and that my company is embracing to be able to help marketers precisely with that. Helping deliver that. We won't be able to help you with the creative. We can test out creative for sure, but in the insight. But we can help you get it to the right person at the right time.
So both of you just used insight in your last answer, and I can't tell you how many times someone's shown me an insight that's a data point. So can you talk a little bit about how you actually unlock a true insight about a customer behavior, and what does that process look like for generating the insight, and how do you, who's on the team?
I need to think about that one.
That's a good question.
That's a good question. I know.
This was not a
on this one.
pre-planned, pre-approved. This is me getting
It's a really good one. That's why I'm
challenge
trying
us to see how
Yeah.
well we
2
can think
minutes.
on the top of our how do you call it, on the top of our feet. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can explain a little bit, the GumGum contextual technology, Verity, we read beyond a URL or keywords, right? So we're able to synthesize the tone of the page, the images on the page, it's content level data. And so we've been around for 15 years. We've been doing this. This isn't something new, because we heard, the Google was thinking about dropping the cookie. And because of that, we have developed a lot of data that allows you to better understand your customer in terms of, like you were mentioning the shoe, reading articles about shoes, and obviously, putting a shoe ad on the page makes a lot of sense, but there's also a lot more that you can learn from the customer based on being on that shoe page, right? Based on all of the data we've collected. And then that person maybe also likes, wine, or they like sports or whatnot. And it really depends on the vertical and the customer we're working with, but we're able to kind of partner with them and start to teach them how to apply those contextual data points to the way they're buying in the future. And I think that's probably the best way I can explain how we're doing it today. I think it's specific to the vendor and the need, or the client and the need, but that's the way our tech works.
Okay. So an example, for example, might be there is a health and wellness company that is just entering the German market, and they were thinking that we should focus on women 25 to 35, and so they're in the sort of weight management space and a lot of other other health verticals, and we said, does that make sense? You know, they went ahead and theoretically did the research, and then we looked up and said, is that in fact the only people who are looking, you know, or who had the greatest interest in losing weight? And in fact, what we discovered was that that target actually needed to be much wider. In fact, there was really an acute or keen interest in both primarily women, but also men that were from 40 to 59. And so we said, you know, I think you can, of course, you know, be very narrow, but we believe that you're going to be missing out on a huge portion of the TAM.
So it's really, you know, so what I heard from both of you is it's not just about looking at the data and reporting on it. It's also about thinking about the customer needs, interrogating that data, and really trying to draw a meaningful hypothesis that then you can test at scale. So thank you both for coming. Thank you for the pop quiz
Thank
and
you.
tolerating that. And I think we're at time, so thanks everybody.
Thank you.